we are live for the final day here in New York City. Yes, you'll go join all the festivities, the culture, the beautiful people down in Miami. My name's Kay. Peter Schrager is singing. Kyle Brandt's very happy.
Very happy.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
You're going to get angry in a little bit, though.
Yeah, we're going to all-time Super Bowl angry runs. They're so good. But it's all happiness down in Miami. I'm very excited to get there. I got my rollerblades ready. I dominate with those things.
Nate Burleson.
Daisy Dukes, too?
If that.
Nate, you've been packed for a week.
Yeah, definitely.
You have some fits?
Of course. I'm going to be looking good, Kay.
Okay, at GMFB, it's time for the lead block.
Lead block.
All right, let's send it over to Miami. We wish we were there now, but Omar Ruiz is holding it down at the James L. Knight Center. He's in downtown Miami. That's where the Niners are holding their media availability a little bit later today. So, Omar, good morning, football, and welcome to the show. We have a young head coach and a young quarterback on this Niners squad. What can you tell us about the relationship between Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo?
Well, good morning, Kay. Kyle Shanahan was asked yesterday if he had to say anything to Jimmy Garoppolo, given the 49ers only threw the ball 8 times in the NFC Championship game, to make Jimmy G's confidence sure that it was right the way they ran the football against the Packers. And Kyle Shanahan said, no, I didn't have to talk to Jimmy at all. Number one, we will never apologize for running the football as much as we do, especially when they're running it as effectively as they did. And number two, because of the relationship that they have, Kyle Shanahan can coach Jimmy G hard, not worry about how his personality comes through. He admits sometimes that he can be abrasive, but Jimmy G keeps it in stride. Now, their relationship goes back to 2014 when Garoppolo, of course, was coming out of Eastern Illinois. Kyle Shanahan was the Browns' offensive coordinator. Shanahan went to go work out Garoppolo, and Garoppolo didn't have many receivers to throw to, so Shanahan ended up running routes. He didn't have any gloves. He said his hands ended up becoming purple because Jimmy G threw the ball so hard, but Shanahan said he didn't have many drops that day. They ended up going to dinner that night, got along well. Of course, the Browns ended up picking Johnny Manziel in the first round that year. Jimmy G went 40 picks later to the Patriots. But what Shanahan said he appreciates about Garoppolo is that night when they met for dinner is the same person Garoppolo is then as he is now, as he gets ready to participate in his first Super Bowl as a starter. They hope to be world champions together on Sunday night.
I love that story. Omar Ruiz, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and we're excited to hear from some of these 49ers at the podium a little bit later today. We'll bring that to you right here on NFL Network and save some fun for us down there in Miami. Back here in New York City on our last show, our last hour before, next time we come back here, we'll know who won the Super Bowl.
Whoa! Hey now.
How important do you guys think, and Nate, I'll start with you, trust factor between a young coach and a young quarterback, especially on the biggest stage?
It's huge. It's huge. You know, when you think about the relationship between different dynamics, we're talking wide receiver to quarterback, linebacker to safety. All those things are important, but there's nothing like the quarterback and the coach. And it starts in the very beginning, how your coach talks to the media. When you look at both of these guys and the situations that they're in, think about what Kyle Shanahan had to say to not, I guess, convince the world, because it wasn't about the outside people. It was more about just trying to calm all of the fires being started. Why Jimmy? Why give him so much money? What does he prove? Do these games even matter? And then on the flip side, you look at Andy Reid. I remember when Pat Mahomes had one summer where he was just throwing interception after interception after interception. And Andy Reid came out and said, well, we got to see what he's working with. Like, what do you want me to do? He has to let it go. So that's important, because it's before a guy can have confidence in himself, the individual that's running the whole show has to show confidence in them. And oftentimes it comes with the words, which is why I always say that if it's a player, a leader on the team, or a coach, they're not talking to us. They're never talking to us. They're talking to the guys listening. And the guys listening are usually your star players.
It's an interesting dynamic because Omar says they met for dinner when he was with the Browns. And, 2014, he didn't draft Jimmy Garoppolo. They went a different route with that one. And then he becomes the head coach of the 49ers, and there's Jimmy Garoppolo on the board. And they didn't draft Jimmy Garoppolo. Mahomes. They didn't draft him and let him go. Garoppolo kind of fell in their lap. This was a call from Belichick to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, and then John Lynch back to Bill Belichick, back and forth. And then it was like the trade deadline. I guess let's get Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay, let's do it. Kirk Cousins was originally a lot of people thought would end up in San Francisco because he was going to be a free agent. He didn't. It was almost like a marriage that was never meant to be. And not only are they making it work, it's almost a marriage like it was supposed to be. This is the perfect marriage because Kyle Shanahan likes to dictate that game plan. And in this game plan, sometimes it's going to take 8 pass attempts for us to win a game.
Yeah.
And a quarterback with a different ego or a quarterback with a different persona or maybe a quarterback with a different pedigree might raise his hand and say, hey, coach, you're hurting me here.
I want to do more.
I want to do more. And I'm getting this legacy now that maybe they're winning despite me. Garoppolo doesn't have any of that in him. There doesn't seem to be the me-first attitude. And Kyle Shanahan, in a weird way, it's almost the perfect quarterback for him where it's a guy who he can dictate and say, here's how we're going to win a game. And that guy says, yes, sir, and then goes and wins the game. And when they've needed him, against New Orleans, against Seattle, against Arizona down 16 points, Jimmy Garoppolo did win those games with his arm. So I find it to be a very, very unlikely marriage based on where they came from in this thing. But maybe it's the best marriage of all.
It is.
Rom-com. They ended up together, and it's perfect.
I know. I wanted it to be you. But you got 2017, I think it started. It's not only that they got him, that run that Garoppolo went on, and they're like, yeah, let's give him a $100 million contract. That's the trust. I think what's interesting about this is the whole Andy Reid losing the last Super Bowl he was in, I don't think that's that interesting because it was so long ago, and it's a different deal. It's a different sport now. But the trust factor, if Kyle Shanahan gets a lead in this game, if he goes up, because I do think that the 28
Talk about it.
is relevant. I think it's very relevant about that's recent history, and that's like dealing with success. So if they get up, and if they're up 20-6, 20-10, like what does he do? Because I'll tell you this, Kyle Shanahan trusted Matt Ryan probably to a fault. You just keep chucking this thing. So I'm going to be fascinated to see how he uses Garoppolo if they get up. And especially if they get down. If it's 20-10 Chiefs, is it still Mostert and Breida? Is it like, go to work, Jimmy. This is why we paid you. I think it'll be both. I think they laugh at the 8 pass attempt thing. And I also think that's a quarterback's dream. These aren't wide receivers who want the ball. A quarterback, when you throw it, you got to get hit. You'd rather hand it off every time. 8-yard gain, I'll take it. I think you're going to have to see him rely on Garoppolo. And I think he will not hesitate for 1 second.
I think it would shock us if they went run heavy on the other side of the ball, right? They're going to air it out for sure with these speediest wide receivers we've ever seen play in a Super Bowl. And Patrick Mahomes was at the podium a little bit earlier this morning down there in Miami talking about the Chiefs and their need to get off to a fast start. Take a listen.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the last 2 years that I've played, I feel like we've always got off to great starts and scored a lot of points. And with the last 2 games, we haven't been able to do that. And so for us, it's about just going in there with the right mindset, not trying to do too much, staying within the game plan, and just playing like we played the last 3 quarters of both the last 2 games. And if we do that and just execute it at a little bit higher level at the beginning of the game, we can hopefully not fall behind like we have the last 2 weeks.
But you fell behind and you came back and won those games. So I don't know if this, I'm really that worried about this. I know it's a different team. I know it's the best team in the NFC that they're taking on and that defense. I just feel like the Chiefs team has to be so supremely confident going into this one because they were able to dig themselves out of the hole. Up against the wall.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Listen, as much as I can appreciate the comebacks, 24 down in the first quarter, that's phenomenal to pull that off in the playoffs and then being down 10 and seeing it live in person while I was watching that game in KC. That's all fine and dandy, but there's no way that you could be down a couple of scores up against the 49ers. Houston Texans weren't built to run out and bleed the clock. So they had to stick with what they knew.
Titans were, though.
The Titans were. But they beat up on Derrick Henry from the beginning of the game and took him out. So in the second half, they had no choice but to try to use Ryan Tannehill's arm. As much as I can appreciate how fast these guys strike, and I said that these guys strike as fast as a viper.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the defenses has venom stuck in them, and they're paralyzed. They're paralyzed with it all.
Right.
My bad with the snake thing. I keep forgetting. But when it comes to these guys, they're not going to be paralyzed like that. Like this Niners team is different. They're built different. They have a different type of energy. And if they get the lead, they will put their foot on the throat of the Chiefs. This will not be the comeback kids. The Chiefs better try to get a lead and keep a lead.
I think there's this feeling that if either team gets out in front, like the other team look, the Niners, they're another team that can come back. I think you'd think, well, if you're up 14-0, they can't come back. They were down 27-13 in the Superdome.
Talk about it.
And they broke out all sorts of trick plays, and they had Mostert catching passes from Sanders, and they had Debo on the jet sweep. They were down 16 against Arizona. Like, I don't think either team is dead in this thing, and I certainly don't think the Chiefs will ever stop putting it to the metal. So down 10, they can win still. If the Niners are down 10, they can win still. This is
You
one
covered
of
a lot of Super Bowls, Peter. It's never what we think. Wouldn't shock me for a second if the Niners throw 7 times on their first drive and the Chiefs come out running the ball. Not for a second. In fact, maybe they're doing that because everybody expects the opposite. Watch. It'll happen. Art of war. It's a good part of war. Watch.
With your thoughts on Sunday's game, we're headed to Miami tomorrow. The Chiefs were there just moments ago hitting the podium in front of the eyes of the world. And we're going to show you what Travis Kelce had to say about his preparations for the biggest game of his life. And who needs a pump-up speech before Sunday?
Oh, Kittle. Look, Kittle needs practically asleep.
He needs somebody to light a fire under his butt, for sure.